Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Thanks for your patience with the late episode. I was driving all over the place, specifically from Chicago to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And if you haven't been, I highly recommend it, particularly in the summer. These days, the winter isn't so bad. I mean, typically, when you go up there in the winter, it's pretty crazy. But thanks to things like climate change. I hate to be that guy, but it's a bummer. The worst part is like these, and the folks that I met up there were pretty cool. Like nobody too crazy, right? Nobody like too, but like I would say a large portion of the Upper Peninsula is like, probably conservative, and it is what it is. It's fine. They're nice. They're nice. They're nice people, right? It's like going to a small town anywhere. That's what it feels like. But the crazy part of it is like this, like there's like the large a large part of them are like super conservative, and like probably things like the anti-global, is anti-global warming the right term? You know what I'm trying to say. People that might question it, conspiracy theory type of people. I would say a decent portion of the folks up there probably subscribe to things like that. Now, it is what it is. Like I said, the shows were great. Everybody I met was very nice, fine. I would say by demographic, if we're gonna throw an assumption, I'm gonna assume that a lot of these people don't believe in climate change. And then when you go up there in a winter like this one, where quite frankly, it was beautiful. It was like 50 degrees, something like that, in February, and we're like, touching Canada. That's crazy. It made the drive a lot easier, I'll tell you that. Like that was a lot nicer, but it's kind of a bummer. I know I feel like I said this a week or two ago, but when the local economy up there is a lot of snowmobilers, like in every bar, because we did a lot of shows in bars. I mean, because there's not a full-time comedy club in the Upper Peninsula, you know what I mean? So we did a lot of bar type venues in small town bars. A lot of regulars, a lot of like good hardworking folks, and they love their. This thing is like these small towns are so much fun to do stand up in because they're so appreciative. They're like, "Whoa, you came all the way up here," like that's so it's always fun, and they're always great crowds. But hearing them talk about how this year has sucked because so many people like to come up there and just ride snowmobiles, which I think is funny. Like it sounds fun, but it is a silly hobby, right? Like I'm trying to think. I mean, maybe I'm just being a party pooper, but I'm like, what? This is what you do with your winners? And then they're like, well, come on out with us, and I'm like, well, you're drunk, sir. I better not get on the back of your snowmobile. I don't know. I'm out of network. I don't. We're like 40 miles from the nearest real hospital, so I'm gonna have to pass. But that does sound like fun. It's in fact, it's so fun. Like like we did. I mean, there's some snow, but not enough to bring up an entire group of folks to bring in the money that they need locally, right? They're like, man, we would pay our entire year off of this season. And so they've had nobody all season because there's not been enough snow to snowmobile. However, people are still doing it, right? So one of the shows was like Friday night, I think. We, in the middle of my set, and it was going fine. It was one of these things. First of all, I have to give a huge shout out to, they're called Frozen Squid Comedy. They produce shows up there. They do a great job putting the shows together. And then my friend Billy Reno, we did the shows together. And we did Friday night, about halfway through my set, it was going fine. Even Billy was like, it was better than you think, which, it's one of those things where I'm like, I mean, you don't expect a standing ovation in an environment like this, right? Not that I've ever had one, but in an environment like this, you're just kind of like, I'll take what I can get, and if it goes good, that as far as I'm concerned, it's great, as long as everyone's having a good time and the jokes are working. If I don't, if I'm not getting a rip roaring applause, maybe it doesn't necessarily mean I suck, but you still can't help but feel that way when, people are kind of looking at you confused, but also at the same time, sometimes silence can be a good thing. It can be, if you really pay attention, it can mean they're just listening, It's like, it doesn't mean you're bombing, but it means like it's going okay. Everyone's having a good time. They just might not like to laugh out loud. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's true, because after the show, people came up to me as if they had a blast. And I was like, geez, you guys didn't act like it, because I hated myself the entire time I was up there. But there was a moment where halfway through my set, there were four guys that get up. And now the thing is, there are snowmobilers up there, and some of them come to the shows. In fact, typically, you'd be performing for an entire group of snowmobilers. I've done shows in the UP before. Years ago, I remember, it was 300 people. We were in a casino, like ball. It was almost like, it was like a banquet room, set up for a show. And they're like, don't worry, the snowmobilers will be here tonight. And I'm like, what does that mean, And then I walk down to the show later, and there are 300 people in their gear with their helmets out on the table. It is the funniest thing. And it's just odd, because you're like, wow, this is literally how you guys got here. And then, I went up to my hotel after, and I'm looking out my hotel window, and there are hundreds of snowmobiles. It's the funniest thing. And it kind of made me want to do it, right? So cut to like last Friday, these four guys get up in the middle of my set, and they're not having, I'm assuming they weren't enjoying it. And you just hear, because they're all in their big puffy snowmobile gear, and they're just like, and like it was dead silent. And, we're all just watching them leave. And I was like, man, you could have left like during a laugh. It's very obvious what's happening right now, because you're being so loud, and they're not trying to be rude, but it is funny when you're in full snowmobile gear and you just hear and they're like, hey man, we really enjoyed it, but we just got to get out of here. And I was like, whatever. Okay, thanks buddy. Enjoy your snowmobile trip. But I tell you what, I had some of the most fun. And I grew up in like South, the LP, which they don't call it that, but I said it to be funny. And people the people that laughed. You know what I mean? I'm from the Lower Peninsula of Michigan. I grew up in the Detroit area. So since I've done comedy is the only reason I've ever gone to the Upper Peninsula. It's one of these things. It's like, it's a different world. It's like part of like Michigan culture, right? But it also could be its own thing. In fact, there have been multiple times where they've tried to become their own state. There are times when I'm like, am I in Wisconsin right now? If it almost feels like, especially on the western side of the Upper Peninsula, you feel like you're in Wisconsin. You kind of get that Wisconsin, northern Minnesota accent a little bit. And some of the things culturally are kind of similar. Like you almost feel like this could be a great setting for like a True Detective season. I think that'd be kind of cool. But it's a really interesting part of the country. I think and it truly is fun, especially if you like outdoorsy stuff. It's a great place to go in the summer. But I feel like I'm doing a commercial for the Upper Peninsula. But I've been up there. The only reason I've ever had to go up there is because of stand-up. And without stand-up, I never would have checked it out, all these different areas, right? And I got to say, I love it. I feel like I could live up there, right? The more and more crazy people get, the more I want to live in like a remote area. And I'm like, maybe I could do this. I could live up here. We got pasties. I don't know if you ever had a pasty, but holy hell, it's great. You got to be careful who you text the word pasty to, because it looks a lot like pasty when it's typed out. So you risk really making it awkward. So keep that in mind. But they're delicious, and I highly recommend it. I always go see my personal rule is if it's not a legit pasty unless you get it north of the Mackinac Bridge. Okay, so keep that in mind. You can get them elsewhere, but just know it's not authentic. Okay. So Billy Reno and I did a whole run. We did 3 cities, and each day involved a drive, right? So I drove from Chicago, which took me about 6 hours to get to the first stop, Manistee, okay? And we did that show, and then the next night, it was about a 3-hour drive to that show. That was up in Houghton. That's where Michigan Tech is. If any of you love colleges, that's a big landmark. Great town. I loved it up there. Now, I've been there before, but this was the first time since before the pandemic. So it is fun when you kind of cruise through the town and you're like, whoa, this is remember being here. I remember going there. And I stayed at a different hotel this time. It's a small town, so you only got so many choices of hotel. And the hotel, I mean, it was like a Quality Inn or something, and pretty standard. Nothing, nothing crazy, nothing bad, just like right in town, which is ideal. And I drove 3 hours to the, and it was like snowing a little bit, and I was a little out of it. It was just like a long afternoon driving in snow. You're focused, you're a little drained, you're trying not to blink. You're just like trying to pay attention to the road. So doing that for 3 hours, it was a little stressful at times. So like you got to decompress a little bit. So as I kind of like take a deep breath, I pull into the parking lot and I relax. I'm like, okay, I'm here. I made it. We got a show in a couple hours. I just got to go change. I'm trying to like, reset my mind. So I'm a little zoned out and I'm walking into the hotel lobby and I'm like looking at my phone. I'm just not paying attention. And when you've done this, you've not paid attention before. We've all done it. And if you don't think you have, you're lying to yourself. But I'm walking into the hotel lobby and I'm looking at my phone and I see ahead of me in my peripheral vision, I see like there's 2 steps up, and so I see there's like a landing, and then there's the front desk. So I'm focused on that, and I'm like looking at my phone, but I'm looking at the steps, and I get to the steps and I look up. There is the biggest taxidermied bear that I've ever seen in my life, and it's a brown bear. I don't know if that matters. It doesn't. It could have been any bear. The first thing Billy pointed out was that they're not native to Michigan, so he took issue with that. But it's more just scared the hell out of me because it was a bear in the lobby. You're not ready to see that because I'm expecting to be indoors, in society. Like what, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, it scared the hell out of me. I'm not kidding. I almost dropped my phone and I go, like I literally gasped as bad as that. I don't know if that was a good impression. It might have been one of those things where you had to be there, but it was an audible gasp and I got very scared as a grown man. It scared the hell out of me. And the girl working behind the front desk was not amused. I mean, she knew what happened, and I couldn't pretend like it didn't happen. We've all like I've been embarrassed before, like alone, like not with a group of friends that could have like backed me up or made fun of me to break the ice. And instead I'm like, oh, this poor woman had to see me get terrified, like, and she was not interested in entertaining it because like I called myself out immediately. I go, that bear just scared the hell out of me. I go, did you see that? And she's like, yep. What route? Checking in. What are you doing? And something tells me she's just had enough of the bear. Like I bet you it's a topic of conversation all the time. And she's, and she had like the college apparel on. So I'm pretty sure she's just like a student in town. So she's just not interested in hearing anything I had to say. But I thought it was so funny. I mean, that was the highlight of my weekend, folks. That was the funniest thing that happened to me. The shows were fun. I had such a good time. I want to do that every weekend up in the UP. It was so much fun. And that's about as eventful as life gets when you're like this, I don't want to say boring stand-up, but I'm trying to be better about, I mean, I had my fair share of drinks. I like to go out after the show, but I'm trying to be a little more focused on the task at hand. I'm trying to like be a little more diligent with my like, okay, no, I got a show. I'm here to do the show. I'm not here to goof around. And then after the show, we'll go out if people want to do that, which I'm all for, but it's not, it's just like the older I get, the less exciting my life gets in a good way, if that makes sense. Like I try to not sound lame, but like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Really go get trashed in northern Michigan? I mean, I guess there's one thing, because that's the thing. If you want to, that's a great place to do it. Okay. Pretty much anything goes up there. Also, oddly enough, I'm pretty sure every show I did, someone sent me a drink on stage, which I thought was funny. Like that was just like it was like kind gesture of from people in the crowd were like, so what's he drinking? And they would send me one, and the server or bartender would walk over to me in the middle of a setup, like I'm trying to do a joke, and they're like, so-and-so sent this. And I was like, oh, that's the thing. If you're in a comedy club, the wait staff is trained to, maybe to try and not distract the audience from the show or the comedian, you almost don't want to be noticed, right? It's almost like we don't want to know you're there, and that's not to be rude. We need you, right? It's a huge part of the whole thing. But the best wait staff are the ones you don't know are there. You can't hear them, you can't see them, you don't distract the audience too much. You're not too loud, like. But when you're in a towny bar up north, it's like no one knows. No one knows. This is just a free for all. And it was it was. I'll tell you what. Overall, one of the best weekends I've had in a while. So cut to this week. I got a lot of. I'm not someone who carries cash ever. I don't have cash on me. I usually don't. I don't mess with cash, right? But this particular week, I usually I stock everything up until I save up until I have to make like a deposit, right? And it'll be a large sum of money. However long it takes, that's when I do it, okay? And it's usually when I go, man, that's a lot. I should probably take this to the bank. Now, to make this easier to understand, I never changed banks when I moved so my bank is in a different state, and however, I can still like do everything remotely, so it's fine. I always thought like, why even bother with it? And what happened to me this week is a great example of why I should probably just change, because it's just turned into a huge nightmare. Here's what happened. I have a large sum of money on me, cash, right? And for the sake of the story, let's just say it's $10,000. Don't worry, it was not that much money. I just don't want anyone to know really how much I'm dealing with. Now, let's just say, for the sake of the story, it was $10,000. Make it nice and easy. Enough to be like careful and worried. Okay? Like enough to like discreetly put it in your pockets, in your inside pocket, zipped up, secured, and then you dress it down to go to this is am I crazy? Because I live in Chicago, okay? I'm not a psycho, but I'm also not an idiot, okay? I'm not going to walk around with that large sum of cash on me. Like, I'm trying to be careful about it. So I safely find a bank nearby that I can make a cash deposit at. And I go into the bank, and this manager, the bank manager, which how often do you talk to the bank manager, right? I go, hey, I'm trying to make a cash deposit. I'm at a shared branch in another state. So he goes, well, you have to do it at the ATM. So I go to the ATM, and it looks exactly the same. Like, it's all legit, right? It's a legit setup. I'm not an idiot, okay? I am an idiot, but I'm not that stupid. So I put my card in, my PIN number, the whole thing, right? I do the whole thing. Everything is normal. I put the largest wad of cash I've ever had in the machine, and you can tell when it's counting it, but it didn't make that noise. It kind of went click, click, and it just some weird message popped up on the screen, and it said like error or something. And I go, shit, that doesn't look good. And it just gave me my card back, and no deposit, no receipt, nothing happened. All it did was take my money, and I'm freaking out. I'm like, this is a lot of money. This is like a mortgage payment. Like, this is, you know what I mean? Like, it's enough for me to freak out. If it was like $20, it'd be like, whatever. But this is enough to like freak out, So of course I go over to the manager guy, who seemed so annoyed to have to talk to me. It was so funny. First of all, he was already like, oh, you got to put in the ATM. Like, he said it like I should know this. Even though I was polite, man. I was like, hey, sorry, sorry I suck. How do I do this? And then he's like, yeah, you got to do it at the ATM, you idiot. He may as well have said that. And then, of course, this happens. So, of course, I have to go back to his office, do that half knock thing. And by the way, it's an office, but it's not a real office, okay? But, like, this guy was so excited. You could tell he's like this guy that's like, yeah, I call it my office, but, there's no nameplate. He just gets the desk that's there for the day. So this guy, he's like totally flexing on me, right? He thinks he's so, he thinks he's hot shit. I'll just say it, guys. And I have a genuine concern here. And I don't think I'm crazy for, this is the closest I've ever been to have, like, I may have had a tone of concern, but not like this was this guy's fault. Because in my head the whole time, I'm like, it's not his fault. He doesn't own the bank. Okay. This guy makes like 30 grand a year. He doesn't really care. about my concerns. And he's also not directly responsible for these problems. So he is just trying to go home. Of course, it's like at the end of the day, too. So he's just like waiting to go home. And he's just like looking at me. And I walk him over to the ATM. And I'm like, guy, this machine took my money. There's no proof that I made this deposit, but I made this deposit. We got 18 cameras on me. And I'm thinking he's just going to be able to go, oh, you know what? Let me go on back. I'll take the cash off the top or whatever. And he's like, I can't do that. And I go, what do you mean you can't do that? It's just, you guys just keep the money. And that's pretty much what he said. And I go, and I'm starting to freak out. I'm like, how do I get my money back? Tell me how to get my money back. Because I realize there are protocols involved. I get it. Okay. I've had jobs that, I've had to be this guy before, right? Dealing with the psycho customer. But the difference is I'm dealing with like a lot of money. Enough of money for this guy to go, oh, geez. Like, he's like, I see why you're so concerned. When I told him how much, he's like, yeah, he goes, I'd be freaking out too. And I'm like, well, can you just tell me how to get my money back? Because I'm freaking out right now. And it seems like I won't get it back today. And the whole like perk of doing a cash deposit is it's available immediately. Now, otherwise I would have just spent the cash, But so this guy's like not helpful, but he's like, look, you got to contact your bank. Tell them what happened, and then they'll contact us. And then when we see that there was a problem, I go, but there was a problem. There's 18 cameras here. You can see, I can tell you exactly how many of each dollar bill was deposited. And he's like, yeah, this is how it works. And I'm like, so this sounds like bullshit, really, is what it sounds like. And he's like, trust me, you just got to do this. So I call my bank, and the bank is like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, okay. So I go back in and I go, hey, guy, my bank was like, what are you talking about? And he starts getting mad at me as if like I don't have like a real problem. Like, I'm sorry you work at a bank and someone came in with a question about how a bank works, especially for a problem that's never happened to me before. Also, why is this ATM still available? Like, you would think if it's just taking cash from people, you're not concerned about why the machine is doing this. This guy is a total idiot. So, because you can tell, like, I get it. I got a little, like, not snippy, but impatient, like annoyed, because I'm like, dude, how do I get this cash back? It's not a check, you know what I mean? So I finally get a hold of my bank, and this guy was so unhelpful. You got to, like, say the right terms, that's just customer service, I guess, but, like, nobody knew what I was talking about. And I explained it. I thought it was pretty straightforward. And then as soon as I said the words ATM dispute, my bank was like, oh, yeah. He goes, all right, we'll dispute this with their bank. And then as soon as they find out that you deposited the amount, and I go, but I was right there. They have footage. They have high def footage of me doing this. And this is the problem I have with this whole scenario is that if I had like committed a crime, it would have been solved immediately, right? Like if I tried to break in or rob them, they would know everything right away. This guy had a thought like, I just wanted my cash back, but he couldn't do it. So now I got to wait. And they said up to 10 days for this to go through. And that's like the worst part because I'm like, the minute you owe anybody money, a company, the IRS, anybody, that shit is withdrawed before it's even due. Like the second, like the first of the month hits, your rent comes out of your account. Like the second it turns midnight. And then the minute you are owed money, they're like, yeah, it's going to take like a week, maybe a week and a half. And it's cash. It's all cash. Oh. So I'll be eating rice and beans for the next 10 days until this money shows up. But if you want to see me tell jokes, I would love to see you out on the road. Check this out. I'm doing some shows in Niles, Michigan. There's a new club there called the Underground Laugh Lounge. Another small town in Michigan. And, it's these are my favorite towns to perform in. So if you can't make it to that one, there's probably another one nearby. If you want to see me perform live, go to my email list, sign up. There's a link in the show description. Go to my Instagram, link in my bio, and sign up for my email list. That would be the easiest way to do that. I will let you know when I'm performing near you. Just give me your zip code, and next time I'm in town, you'll be the first to know. Also, I'm working on a website. I know, right? Doesn't it sound archaic in some ways? I'm mainly doing it because I got scolded by someone who really, and they had a good reason too. They were like, how do I know? I don't even know where you're working, when you're working. Like, somebody trying to book me, and they were like, I couldn't even find you. And I'm like, but you have my number. You could just call me. I mean, that's how you got a hold of me. But, I didn't say that. But he was like, you should get a website. You're crazy. He goes, if anyone in the industry, and that's what he said, the industry, which I knew. So I know he means legit, right? Anyone legit is going to want to see a website. They're like, none of this link tree. And so I'm like, all right, I'll put up a website. So there's my gift to you, to my listeners. Go look for my website. That'll have all my shows too. And sign up for my email list. Keep downloading the podcast. Tell your friends about it. Thanks for listening. I'll see you out there. And we'll see you next week with another brand new episode of Nate Knows Nothing.